Well, Bob, we're going to get started here, and we're just gonna get rolling. I'm going to start by first of all just introducing myself to those of you who may not know me. My name is Jim Zasowski. I'm president and founder of Z1 Career Zone, and we are a career consulting firm that really helps out a lot of individuals. A majority of our clients are those professionals who are, as you can imagine, a lot of people are either frustrated with work, don't like what they're doing, or they're disengaged and are trying to figure out, okay, what can I get into that I could really enjoy my work and really thrive in and all that stuff. And as you know, some of our clients have lost their jobs through this whole pandemic and so forth, and trying to figure out, hey, how do I get that differential advantage and knowledge to get into the right job as my next career step. And then started to do quite a bit of work with undergraduates and colleges and universities. And we now have our fully customized undergraduate curriculum, which we are really, really excited about. Have a guy by the name of Josh Taylor, who's the head of the business school at University of Kentucky, who is our facilitator for that on-demand class. And Josh is one of the best in the business, and he works with undergraduates, been doing that for 15 years. There's a lot of corporate experience as well. And his curriculum also is addressing all those young men and women that are graduating that don't have jobs, right? And you can imagine it's a really tough job market out there. So if you've got a son, daughter, nephew, whatever, and they're getting ready to graduate and don't have a job yet and feeling a little bit down and, and struggling and stressed out, definitely connect with us. We think we could definitely help you out with that. I'm also very excited is we're kicking off our first Major League Baseball club here this month that is really focused on the minor league ball players who have now, they'll be finishing their spring training. Of course, Major League Baseball was done about a week ago, but they'll finish theirs up through this month. And there'll be, a certain percentage of those that will not be returning to baseball. And so this first professional team that we're doing this with next week, they really feel that they have an obligation to help these young men transition into the real world. And I'm really excited about that because I'm a big baseball fan and I know the need is there. And then we're also starting to do some work with military veterans transition civilian world. So excited across the board about all the things that are going on. So please feel free to reach out. If you've got any questions, info@z1careerzone.com is the easiest way to get a hold of us, and that's on our website as well. So that's that little update. Going to give you a couple of ground rules. Mics have been muted to avoid any disruptions that we might have, whatever. But encourage you for sure to go ahead and any questions you have, comments at any time during this webinar, go to our Q&A feature below and share those with us, and we'll try to answer as many as possible at the end of the webinar. I had actually a couple of questions come through on my email even prior to this that people said, hey, I want to make sure I get my question in. So we've got those, and if we don't get to them by the end of this, we will get back to you on that, I promise. Last but not least, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. We're putting out great information, great tools every week on all of those social media platforms. So whichever one you're involved with, go ahead and add Z1 Career Zone to that. So let's get started on this. And I tell you what, I'm really excited about introducing Bob to you and Bob Broady, our guest speaker here. And this, I think, is the 12th webinar that we've had now. It's over a year now. We have one the first Wednesday of every month. And boy, and we've had some really interesting topics, everything from, understand how studio startups work, a big new business model in startup companies, to hearing about the success of a young man who's built one of the top 10 automotive repair shops in all of America at an extremely young age, to experts that are just in medical diagnostics. So we've got it a little bit across the board. We had Second Act Women a couple of weeks ago that focus on women 40 plus in the marketplace. And today we've got Bob Broady with us. I'm going to be talking about executive recruiting and recruiting firms and all this. And I'm, heck, if you don't know this, which you might not, Bob and I go way back. We are college roommates. And I was so excited to get to this webinar because this is a topic that very much believe in the value of executive recruiters. Bob and I have worked together at our recruiting firm for 13 years, and Bob now runs BroadReach Search Partners. And so, write that down and be able to connect with Bob at any point in time. If you're a hiring manager looking for a great recruiter that you can trust is going to get you access to great candidates, or if you're a candidate that's looking to make a change or whatever, highly recommend Bob. So, I've known Bob forever, and it's been my pleasure to do that. And, Bob's from Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and you can imagine I grew up in New Jersey. College roommates in Tennessee. It was crazy, right? We're very, very different in a lot of ways, but we're very similar in a lot of ways too, which is I think why we were able to work so well together over the years. And it was clearly my pleasure to do that. And so, I wanted to tell you something because, and you've seen me do this if you've been on these webinars before, is I love going to the LinkedIn profiles, right? And looking at recommendations and see what people say about the person that I'm about to introduce. And now I could easily tell you about Bob because I know him so well, but I'm going to read what other people have said and the words they use to describe Bob Broady. And let me share those with you. Expert, responsive, attentive, available, your ally, trustworthy, valuable resource, fully transparent, professional, goes the extra mile, a trusted advisor, honest, an advocate, expert in his field, right? And those are just a few of them. And I circled a few of these because, if I were going to say, to describe Bob, and these words were said several times, right? And that is trustworthy and honest, right? And I'm going to tell you this, and I'm not telling you anything different. When it comes to executive recruiters, we all know this. They've got a bad reputation out there, right? And the reason is because a lot of times, unfortunately, they are out for their own well-being, right? And they're very hard to trust. They'll tell you whatever needs to be said for you to get that job. And I can definitively tell you right now that the reason why Bob was, a partner of mine and on my team, and now he's running his own search firm and all this stuff, is trustworthy is there, right? And not only that is Bob does his homework. So, if you're a hiring manager, you can be rest assured that the only candidates you're going to receive are those that are fully qualified, that are going to fit your corporate culture, have value alignment and things like that, right? So you're not wasting your time. If you're on the other side, on the client side, you can trust that he's going to guide you and he's going to tell you things to help you out in the process, but also more importantly, make sure it's the right fit for you. Because, I think it's down to like 16 months when people change jobs, right? And I can tell you a lot of that's because of not value alignment, not culture alignment, right? And that's where you can rely on a great recruiter like Bob Broady and his staff there. So I am thrilled to Bob to do this with you. We're gonna literally do a interview style here, if you will, and we've done this before. And I'm going to stop sharing this slide, and I'm just going to ask Bob, some questions here. And what the first thing that I want him to do is really help give an understanding to everybody that's out there, Bob, about executive recruiters. What do they do, right? And how do you select the right recruiter and all of these things? Because even when I got into recruiting, I probably thought I knew 90% of it. And the reality was I probably knew about 50 to 60% of the reality of it. So I think that would be a really good thing to start off. And really the second thing is I want you to offer some advice on some things that I know a lot of people, I am sure that are on this call, can really benefit from too, and benefit from your expertise. So we're going to do that, and then we'll go into some Q&A at the end, and we're going to go ahead and kick it off, Bob. So glad to have you here, brother.
Super. Well, again, Jim, thank you for the opportunity. And let me just say, first of all, I want to acknowledge you, Jim, for, not only, teaching me recruiting from the outset, when we worked together, but also, so I learned from the best, but also what you've accomplished with your team at Career Zone in terms of taking all this knowledge and packaging it in a way that people could take it online and self-paced and do it themselves. It's amazing. And so I think what you were talking about, Major League Baseball and in a curriculum in a college, those are great accolades, and keep up the momentum. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, thanks. It's I think our tagline, which is changing lives one career at a time, when you see it, and even today, I got this email from this gal who just finished the course, and she went off. It's like, hey, if I could do a testimonial for you, anything, I just landed this great job, and to me, that's what it's all about, right? And you're doing the same thing, in a significant way, and so there's a lot in common there. So thanks for that, Bob. And,
Sure.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And just so you know, Bob is located in Denver, Colorado. All right. And he's got an outstanding staff. I probably know about half of them pretty well. And the other half, I don't know that well. They're new, but I can tell you first rate across the board. So anyway, we'll make sure that you have, at the end, Bob, give make sure they've got your website and your, and all that stuff, and they'll get your email address on our follow-up and stuff like that. Okay.
Super. You bet.
Okay.
You bet.
So we're going to start with the basics here, Bob. And, and again, it goes back to, I think, we make the assumption that people understand executive recruiters, right? And the value they can bring to the clients and also the candidates and all that stuff. And the more I was in the business, the more I realized that, there are a lot of misperceptions. There are just a lot of misunderstandings. And so really his first question is this, tell us what an executive recruiter does, right? And what is that main function that you guys offer out there?
You bet. And as Jim says, our company's headquartered in Denver. We do nationwide work, really mainly focused in healthcare, and have really for 18 years or so. So I think that why people engage an executive recruiter is either the hiring manager of the company or both are looking to accelerate filling a critical position. And so they're looking for an executive recruiter to bring them qualified, screened candidates, and so that they can accelerate the hiring process of a key role. So that's really what it was. And so their main function is really to offload or complement the hiring manager and the internal recruiting staff or HR team.
Okay, got you. And so what I know there's different kinds of recruiters out there, and again, that's one of those things that I didn't even realize when I got into recruiting. There's this term, what's that, right? And all that. Can you kind of give an overview of that? Because I think people will hear things like, staffing, they'll hear, permanent place, and they hear all these different terms, right? So can you kind of nut that out so
sure
you understand what the differences are?
I think, happy to do that, Jim. Yeah, I think that the two major buckets really are, there's sort of the contract and staffing world, and then there's more the perm placement. Now, you will find some firms that do both, but even if they do both, they typically have those groups separate because it's a very different world. On the contract and staffing side, you've got it's typically higher volume, and what you're doing there is you're helping a company get a resource for some period of time. It could be weeks, it could be a few months, it can be renewed, but the employees know they're there on a tour of duty. It's a limited time. And the hiring managers know that. Now, there are sometimes cases where they'll convert it to full-time, but they have an immediate need. And so it tends to be somewhat transactional.
Gotcha.
On the other side, on the perm side, they know it's full-time. They know that this is a marriage. This is not dating, right? So they have to get it right. And so those firms need to take more time in screening of the candidates as well as understanding the role and what they're going to be doing. In order to make that so that it not only is a transaction, but one that will thrive and then grow into promotions and hopefully a long-term relationship.
Right. And you guys are doing strictly perm placement, right? And
we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what would be examples of positions that you fill for companies that are permanent placements, so to speak?
Yeah, so a good example would be a director of sales. So they're looking for someone who's a sales manager. Could be that it's part of an expansion. They've had a very successful product. We've got one client that's growing from 1 billion to 3 billion over a 2-year span, just because of their again, they've got the right product at the right time. So they're looking at expanding, and they do like to promote from within, but invariably there's a geography where maybe they can't find the right talent to promote from within. They're not ready. So what they'll try to do is to say, this is the kind of person we're looking for. We want someone who fits with our culture. We want someone who's got good leadership and management experience. They can mentor our newer reps, that can sort of zoom out and see the strategy of doing larger deals like at IDNs, but also zoom into the details of one-on-one coaching.
Right.
So something like that.
Okay, gotcha. And so now I know this, that and everybody knows this, right? Most companies have their own internal recruiters, right? And so, and they hire them to find candidates for all these open positions, right? But yet, in a lot of situations, they're also partnering with external recruiters, right? Which, as we know, costs them money, right? So why are they willing to spend that extra money when they've already invested all this money in these internal recruiters that work in HR to go find them candidates?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question, Jim. And I think when I first started in recruiting, I had one view of the world. And then what I realized is that not everything is the same. So if you think about sort of smaller companies, they may not have a very big internal staff. And if they have a lot of demands because they're growing, they need extra help. Right. On the other hand, as you get to sort of the medium and larger groups, they have a staff. And we, what we came to know is, look, if it was my company and I had a staff, I want to hire as many people myself as I can because that's lowest cost. Right. But invariably, these internal resources carry anywhere from 20 to 35 positions at one time. Yeah. And so because they're trying to get ROI on their resource. And so the problem is they have to be, and some of them will span everything from a quality assurance engineer to a marketing person to a sales rep. So it's very hard to have subject matter expertise at such a wide span.
Oh, yeah.
So invariably, think of it, we've sort of come up with this thing we call the block of Swiss cheese, right? So most of the cheese is solid. So most of it, do it yourself. But when you've got that rec or that position that's going to take 3 to 10 times longer, right. What has happened in the past is they just sort of throw it under the, I'll get to it when I do. I want to work the easy stuff. Right. So they realized that they need to have a recruiter that they can go to for those holes in the cheese, those difficult searches, so that it can actually free up more time for them to do 3 or 4 others. So it's a good balance. And what you realize is that the internal resources need a trusted partner, a trusted advisor that they can count on.
Yeah. How about on the candidate side? So, what's the benefits of working with, a recruiting firm versus, just trying to go it on your own, right? Okay, I know people inside the company or whatever, or I'm in this industry, I've got a network out there. What's the benefits for them to say, because here's what happens. I know this, right? And I've heard this, and I think I was guilty of this early on in my career, that I'd get a message from a recruiter, I wouldn't call him back. I'm like, I'm not going to waste my time, blah, 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 because I believe that reputation that I heard out there, used car salesman, all that, and didn't want to mess with them. And the fact of the matter is, yes, that's true out there, but when you get the good ones, right? And I guess that's what I'm referring to here. What are the benefits of aligning yourself with a good recruiting firm?
Yeah, no, I can totally relate, Jim, because I can remember getting those calls on my cell phone and thinking, I'm not calling this crackerjack back because they don't care about me. They don't know anything about me, right? Who is this guy and why is he calling me? He got my name somehow, right? So I think that the really good recruiters, however, have a balance. And yes, they're being paid by a firm, but they're guaranteeing their work, right? And they want their placements to stick and to thrive. And so the only way that's going to happen is you've got to work for both. You've got to work for the candidate. And really what that means is, a recruiter can get to know the candidate. I mean, a resume is one thing, but you go much deeper into their values, what they've enjoyed, where's their passion, where do they want to go with their career, what's important around, work-life balance, all those things, right? And if you know that, then I think you can find the right match. So, back to your question about why go with a recruiter? Well, because in many cases, we have long-term relationships with our hiring managers and our clients. So, we can tell the story of the company. We can tell the story of the hiring manager, the type of team he or she has built.
Right.
We can talk about what's really important to that hiring manager, and we can talk them through the process, really as a coach, to help them through so that they can put their best foot forward. And so what I tell candidates is, look, my job is to be your coach. My job is to help you absolutely put your best foot forward. So if this is the job you want, you've got every advantage to get it, right?
Right.
And that's what I view my purpose is for my candidates, and our team is like that. So I think the value is, if you're trying to do it alone, you don't know what the hiring process is. You don't know who's on the team and what's their background and what's important. Right. You're winging it, right? And you might do okay, but it's a little bit of a crapshoot on the first time through.
Yeah, and there's no cost to working with you either. You know what I mean?
No.
Not from them. You know, and what you said earlier too, I think is a huge piece of it is, and I know you do this with your firm. You don't just work with one hiring manager one time, another one time. You're invested in them. You become kind of an arm of that company and an arm to that hiring manager, and they're depending on you, right? Because you know them so well, and you know who's going to thrive under their leadership, so you can dial that in to your conversations with candidates to figure out, okay, you know, what's going to be the right fit for this and all that. And that's where I think, you know, when you said that about an advantage for candidates, I think it's huge because, as you know, if it's not a good fit with the hiring manager, it doesn't matter. You're not going to be there long. That's all there is to it, right? You know, and so understanding that upfront from somebody who's worked with them, those people that they've recruited people to work for that same person, that they've thrived in that job and all that is a huge benefit. So no, that's perfect, Bob. Let's go into questions of advice, right? So, you know, this first one I've got here is, you know, what are the things someone should be thinking about when exploring, you know, or considering a job change, you know? And I know that that you have these 4 Ps that you dial into that consideration. So can you respond to that, and also, sure, you know, share about your 4 Ps that I know is a big part of that?
Yeah, and I think somebody, I can't remember who it was, but I read somewhere they talked about the Sunday night stomach anxiety. And it was sort of like this dread of going to work on Mondays that always hit them Sunday nights. And frankly, I've never had that. So
that's a terrible feeling, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, you know, and I was like, gosh, I had a hard time kind of, but I could see where that's the case. And so I think you mentioned it earlier, you know, people are staying shorter times. It's not the big stigma of changing companies that it once was. I mean, it's more expected now. So I think that if you're not happy, then, you know, look in the mirror and figure out what's missing. And we call it the RFL, the reason for leaving, right? Like, what's missing in my current environment that I'm not fully allowing myself to thrive, right? Or there's something that, so once you, so I think once you know that, then you know, so how do you make sense of all this, right? Because there's startups and there's mid-range, and which do I want, right? And so I think you can self-assess, and I know you guys have some tools for this, of where you thrive, what you enjoy the most. But once you've done that, I think then as you compare things, that's sort of where we came up with the 4 Ps. And it's just a yardstick to really compare different opportunities. So I'll just quickly go through it. Again, we can email this to people if they want. But the first P, and probably one of the most important, is the people. So it's the leadership of the company. It's the vision. Do they have vision? Do they know where they're going? Or is this their first rodeo, right? And that's both for the leadership as well as your immediate manager. The second P is the product or service. Is it unique? Are there barriers to entry? Do they have patents to protect them? Or is it a commodity? Is it a one product company, or do they have other things coming in the pipeline? So all good things to consider. Third P, and actually this may be the most important, is the personality or culture. Do they walk their talk? Are they really diversity, or is it all a bunch of, you know, puffy white guys, as we say, right? I mean, you know, do they promote from within, or is it highly political and everyone's got their back against the wall, afraid of be, you know? So the personality is really important. And the last P is the package. Oftentimes that's the only P that people look at. Oh, well, it's going to pay 10,000 more. But man, how many times have we both talked to people that they took that job and in 6 months they're looking because they didn't think about the other 3. But the package is not just comp, right? It's benefits, it's stock, and those kinds of things. So I think those 4 Ps are a good rubric to compare opportunities you may be evaluating.
No, honestly, those 4 Ps are fantastic. And I agree with you. It's so many times that, candidates will get focused on just the money piece of it. Is it important? Absolutely. Is it the only piece of it? No. And it's not just salary, right? There's, like you said, there could be stock benefits to that. There could be benefits like a 401k, right? That somebody else doesn't have, and all that stuff. So yeah, and I know you guys do a great job of going through that with candidates and really making sure that they understand what that total package is, but without neglecting those other 3 Ps. They are critically important. No, thanks for that, Bob. That's great. Sure. Okay, this next question is, I know we've got, people that are wondering what's the best way to really find a recruiter, right? That can help them get their next job, and, how should they go about this? Whether it's just a recruiter, looking at a recruiter or a recruiting firm, that would be a good fit for them. And so how's the best way to find that? And then secondly, maybe connect with them,
You bet. And again, this is sort of what I've learned, from coming into the business, because I didn't know this before either. But I think what I've seen in the industry, and it's changed a lot over the years, is that the most successful firms really have a niche. And you can think of it as there's an acronym called PHIL that can help describe a specialty. And so let me just explain what I mean by PHIL. So the F is for function. So do they fill a certain type of functional roles, right? An example might be, let's say like a sales role. That's an easy one, right? So the next would be industry. Okay, are they specialized in a particular industry? Because maybe if my background is healthcare and diagnostics, I want to stay in that industry. Okay, well, that would be an industry specialty. The next is level. So it might be that they only do vice presidents. Right. So guess what? If you're a frontline salesperson, they're probably not going to return your phone call because they're working with the big daddies. Or if they do a variety, they probably would return your phone call. So that's level. And then the last is location. Again, not in all cases, but in some cases, they have more of a geographic focus. You tend to find that a lot in areas like accounting, which used to have to always be in person. What's happening a little bit with that PHIL acronym is that now that there's been this work from home extravaganza, right? People are realizing, wow, we actually can have more people remote. So that's opening up a little bit. But I think what you want to do is, if you know what you're looking for in the type of role, try to find a recruiter that matches that sort of fill of your job, and then reach out to them. That's what I would advise.
Yeah. And is there, like, if you're, okay, let's say I'm in Denver, Colorado, right? And I'm interested in healthcare. Do I Google that? Do I, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I would just go to LinkedIn. I mean, you could do both. You could Google it, right? Healthcare recruiters, and if their search engine optimization happens to be at the top, that doesn't mean they're the best recruiter, but they've got the best search engine optimization, right? The other thing is, I would go on LinkedIn. Because you'll see what people have said about them. You can check out their LinkedIn company page, and then check out their website. And a lot of times they'll show you the type of jobs that they are working. Unless they're confidential. And that way you can get a feel of, this looks like, we're in the right sandbox now. Right. So all those things I do.
And, and those are such good resources, LinkedIn and even some of Instagram, because all these companies are on there now, right? And you just go in some of their platforms, you can figure out their culture pretty quick just by looking at the pictures, looking at what their community service is all about, and all that stuff, which 3 years ago, we wouldn't be saying that. It's amazing how technology has changed everything, for sure. So no, that's excellent, Bob. So how much should candidates rely on recruiting firms for advice, recommendations, guidance? Right? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I think it's going to almost depend on the recruiter you're working with. I mean, in some cases, people have been well trained on the opportunity and things like that, but they may not have as much experience. So it could be, I think when you're in an engagement with a recruiter, you want to ask what's been their experience working with the company and the hiring manager. And if they say, I've been working with them for 9 years, I've worked with this particular gentleman or woman, for 5 placements on her team. She's awesome. 2 of the people got promoted. Okay, great. Now, that's one. On the other hand, if it's like, wow, this is my first search with this company. We just got the agreement signed. And I've said this, hey, we're kind of, honestly, we're figuring it out as we go. And it doesn't mean that I don't understand how to coach, in the recruiting world, but
right.
I'm telling them, look, we're going to have to help each other here because, I don't know what the hot buttons are going to be. And so when we debrief after the interview, it's going to be really important because, I can help you round off any rough edges or things like that. So I think it really depends. In some cases, it's a less experienced recruiter. And so it doesn't mean you can't have a good experience, but you will need to drive as the candidate and ask them questions if they don't know about who they're going to interact with in the job. And, where can this job lead? Well, if they don't know the answer, that's their job to find out.
Yeah. And you know what? You make a great point there. And that is that, and this is where this honesty comes in, right? And you just said it. If it's your first search, you share that with the candidate, right? Versus, BSing like you've been their best friends for 10 years and all this stuff. No, now, and also know that you do a lot of work up front before you ever talk to one candidate on really getting 90% of, information that will answer their questions. And then the other 10% comes with more experience and all this stuff. But, I can tell you that, Bob, recruiters, candidates really appreciate that. And that's not 5% of recruiters, maybe, right? And that speaks to really how you do business, how you operate. And that's why you get continued service, working with these clients, search after search after search. And I think that's one of those things that really, when you research a recruiting firm is, see how many clients they have for more than a year that they're doing multiple searches on. Because if that's the majority of their book of business, right, it's telling you that, man, they appreciate what you've done. We're going with you to the next search, right? And it's kind of like, and I know you've got a lot of your business is exclusive, right? Well, these companies, they don't want to deal with 3 or 4 recruiters, right? If they don't have to, they'd rather deal with one that they can trust, that they know when they give you this search, Bob, that it may take 3 weeks to get 3 or 4 great candidates, but they know within 3 or 4 weeks, they're not wasting their time getting people that are kicking the tires and all this stuff, So I think that's really important what you shared there. And I think that's a great question for people to ask if you're not sure. It's like, say, hey, how well do you know this client? Is this your first search with them? And, and all that. And then you could ask some more questions, see, have they done their homework ahead of time, even though it's their first search and all that. So good stuff. All right. And I think we touched on a few of these things and people have heard this, but in your opinion, okay, what's the difference between a great recruiting firm and the rest? And I'm talking about that top 2 or 3%, right? And what is it that you guys specifically at BroadReach do differently that allows you to have that success in the market? And quite frankly, I know that separates you out from 95% of the other firms. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that.
No,
and,
that's it. Yeah,
I think it's really important to talk about.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Jim. And I think that, I think that really, the first thing is it's a balanced perspective. Yes, you're being paid by a company, but if you're not equally representing the candidate, then it just doesn't work. And so what I mean by that is, the first thing we do when we start a search is most recruiting firms are going to get the job description. And this from the days, when we actually do an intake call or sit down, get on the phone with the hiring manager and ask a series of questions. And this is where we call it going deep. It's like an iceberg going under the water. The job description is above the water, but it's all the stuff underneath about their culture, about who they're going to interact with, about where the job can lead, about why it's open. And that's really important. And also finding out about the hiring manager style so you can find someone who's going to thrive. And by doing that, you have an unfair advantage because now you have a really accurate bullseye before you ever start the search, right? And we'll ask them for, look, like we're asking for your help to help sell this job in the market, right? So help us tell your story. And I think that's probably one of the things that we do as well as anyone to engage passive candidates because let's face it, with LinkedIn, access is free. Everybody has access to everybody. It's the people that can truly tell an accurate story that's compelling about all these great companies that are growing and disruptive that attracts people. So that's half of it. The other half is, okay, now that you've got someone here and you can accurately represent the job, is it the right fit? So just like that iceberg we talked about, the resume is above the water, but it's all the stuff you don't see on the resume. Where did they go to school? They're from Pigeon Forge, or New Jersey, or whatever, right? And well, why did you join a fraternity? Well, what did you do there? Well, okay, your leadership role. Okay, well, tell me about your family. Tell me about what's important to you, right? Where do you see yourself growing? And so with all of that information, going deep, it really allows you to find that right fit. And then it's up to us to tell that candidate story, which is equally important. Because I really believe in my heart, everybody on this planet has a special story. For some people, it's harder to get out than others, right? But man, is there a story to be told for everybody. And I'm just so convinced of that. And so to me, I view that that's our role, to represent the candidates in that way and present them to the hiring managers that way.
Yeah. No, that's great. And, one thing that I'm going to bring up, and hadn't thought about this till just now, and I think it's important for people to understand, and I know it's something we touch on in our curriculum too. It's like, it goes back to that question, well, why should I use a recruiter versus send it through a website or whatever? And I said, and when people don't understand, Bob, you understand this because you're in the business, and I understand it because I was in the business, is the minute you send your resume into a company, okay, odds are almost 100% of the time you can no longer work with an external recruiter, because they pay Bob Broady and his firm to find candidates that they don't have in their system. Minute you send that resume in, it's in their system, and Bob brings up this candidate like, Bob, you know what? Hey, we already got them. So, they're ours. You can't represent them. We're not going to pay you for that and all that. So there's these little things that people just have no idea about. And I can tell you right now that referrals, whether it's internal referrals or external referrals, meaning recruiters, is the number one way by far to get jobs. So it just dawned on me thinking about that, and people don't realize that another reason to hold off and figure out who's the recruiter working with that company, and do your homework and try to figure that out, so you can get some assistance. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And I can't tell you the number of candidates that I've learned to say, now, by all means, I'm going to send you a lot of information about the company, including the job description. The job is posted on their website. But by the way, don't apply there until we've gotten you submitted, because it's not going to help your odds. Matter of fact, I can't work with you.
That's right.
If you go on and apply. So please don't. I mean, do your research, but don't apply. You have to literally tell them.
You have to coach.
I thought it'd give me 2 chances instead of 1.
Right.
I mean, it kind of
doesn't work that way. It sounds like it worked that way, but it doesn't work that way. Yeah. I know we've had many conversations about that rule with clients, and but anyway, it's something good to know. And Ramon just sent in. He said that was one of my questions, with a big smiley face. I guess we answered your question there, Ramon. And let's see here, Bob. I can do another question here, and then I'm going to go to some of the Q&A.
Sure.
What would you suggest that people do to maintain a healthy relationship with a specific recruiter, that maybe they've worked with or are engaged with, right?
Yeah. So I think that, again, first off is find the fit, find the match, right? Because if you're in supply chain, happy to help you as any way we can, but we don't have supply chain positions really, so try to find the recruiters that are in your same sandbox. And then in that case, what I suggest is reaching out and do 3 things. Number one, submitting their resume and letting them know, in some cases like a candidate profile, this is my information. And second of all, these are the type of roles that I'm seeking out. And then the third thing is, why me? Like 2 or 3 bullets of what makes me unique and well differentiated for this role. Okay. A lot of companies like us, we stay so busy in the interactions. We're not going to be able to take every phone call and every email, but we do post our jobs. So staying, and frankly, I can't keep up with what my team's working all the time necessarily. So I say, go to the website, because frankly, they might have picked up a job this morning that's already there that I don't even know about.
You don't even know about, yeah.
Yeah, so staying there, and then if you see something that looks like a fit, by all means, inquire, submit, who's working this, let's go. But I think that's really the best way to do it. The other thing is you can do a periodic, maybe once a quarter, if anything's changed on your side, hey, I'm dialing up my search now. This manager that was really a pain in my side has gotten even worse. Now it's a pain all over my body, and
We've all had those.
or there's been an acquisition, or there's been some other thing change that you may not have seen. I'm more eager to find something.
Yeah. No, that's great. And so we're gonna get I got our last 15 minutes or so here. We got a few questions that have popped up here, and so this one's from I guess I'm gonna say your full name, Lisa Carmen, because Lisa, just so everybody knows, and Bob, you too, is Lisa is our resume writing partner, and she does an outstanding job, for us and our clients that we represent. So Bob, she's on our website, she's under our partnership, and everybody out there, if you need or refer a great resume writer, man, Lisa's the person. So, one of the things that Lisa was saying, hey, which is a pretty interesting question, can a candidate rescind an application from a company? Once they've sent in their resume, can they get it out of there, right? Because the disadvantage now is huge, right?
Yeah, I think it's hard to pull it out. I mean, I think I guess it depends on some companies. I think you have like an ongoing live profile, like a candidate profile, and you could just say not interested anymore, or inactive. So you could do that. And sometimes if it's been over a certain period, or you haven't applied for a specific job, even if there's a little bit of back and forth, and we have like an email that we'd sent to the candidate, obviously we'd had dialogue before that happened and it was an accident. Right. In almost every case, people say, okay, clearly you engaged them, and that's why they applied, but that's about all you can really do. And I think that's, to some extent, it depends on the partnership with the recruiting firm and the HR talent people. Again, if I go back to that Swiss cheese metaphor, if they're counting on us to fill the more difficult roles, usually that relationship will overcome a lot of those things. We've had situations where people say, oh, that person was actually in our database, but oh, by the way, there's 100,000 people in the database, and I don't have time to possibly find that person in Idaho. So I'm glad you found them, and I'm happy to pay you.
Pulled it back out. Yeah. And you're right. It always comes down to relationships, doesn't it? And trusted relationships, and they know you're working hard, and on their behalf, they'll help you work through those difficult things. Here's let me go back to the Q&A here. There's a couple more things here. This comes from Taylor, one of our prior industry experts that did one of our webinars. And he's like, I understand that you primarily work for companies and they pay you, but do you on occasion work for individuals specifically, and how does that compensation work in that situation?
Yeah, so about the only, at least for our firm and the way we operate, and I think this is true for many, if there is a candidate that we either know or feel like this person is just absolutely phenomenal and stupendous, and it's unfortunate or a weird circumstance that they're actually looking now, we will represent them. And some people in the industry refer to it as an MPC, a most placeable candidate, and sort of marketing that person into some of the hiring managers. Right. Typically you only do that if it's an executive level type role. Right. And that this person is like, if they have anything remotely close, they are going to hire Jim Zasowski because they're going to see the talent that this guy brings. It's that kind of thing. Right. So it's pretty unusual, but in those cases, we would market them. No charge ever to the candidate, right? Never charge the candidate. But it might actually lead us to, in some cases, getting a new agreement with someone we've never been able to do business because they didn't know we had that level of talent.
Right. And I know historically, interesting question, Taylor, because historically, that's how recruiting firms used to work. I mean, I'm talking 30 years ago, right? Is that if you engaged a recruiting firm, right, and you got hired, they charged the candidate, right? And then that all changed. It went over to the corporation. So I'm sure there's probably a couple out there that do that, but it's pretty much for the most part gone. So if you find a company that's saying, hey, we'll help you for 5-10 grand, I would come to me for a lot less money. I'll help get you engaged, or go to Bob and he'll help you with the preparation side and stuff like that. So good question. Here's another one. So what about when a candidate is working with, this is a good one. So what about when a candidate is working with two different recruiters and those two are working for the same company for the same position?
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, it's an unusual situation, but it can happen. And I think what I would encourage you to do is, if it's two recruiters in sort of the same fill or the same type of industry, I think you want to be, you got to pick your battle, right? I mean, you can't apply to the same company. One recruiter, the way it works contractually is whoever submits you first is going to get to represent you, right? So between the two, what I would do is pick the one that you have the most confidence and trust in, that you think knows the client and the hiring manager best, has the best relationship, and can represent you the best.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Because what's going to happen, I can assure you, as soon as the other recruiter finds out, you are now the enemy. You are now the competition, and they are going to try to beat you and cut you out at the knees. So that friendship you used to have just got leveled. So I think what I would encourage you to do is, try to find the right recruiter and build a strong relationship with one in an industry if you can. Yeah. Because I think when you start flirting with a lot of people, it can bite you.
Yeah. And you'll find too that a lot of recruiting firms, I know Bob's firms like this, not all the time, but you know what? Their relationships with their clients are on an exclusive basis, which means they are only hiring Bob to fill this search, right? They have enough confidence in him, and they don't want mixed messages out there with 3 or 4 different, recruiting firms out there. And now still there's hiring managers that think, hey, the more recruiters I got out there, the better off I am. But the fact is, it's just the opposite, is that if Bob's out there and he could work this job for this company and he's got 100%, right? That he's the only one working it. Okay, where's Bob going to spend his time? Is he going to spend his time there, or is he going to spend his time working with a client that says, hey, Bob, you're one of 4 recruiters I got out there. They're not committed to you, right? And so the good recruiting firms almost always have exclusive relationships, or they may do where they're competing just to prove themselves. But for the most part, that's a definite differentiator with recruiting firms, right? Versus anybody taking any job just to have work. So good question.
Yeah, and Jim, just to add to that, I mean, I think an analogous of this would be, if you're, someone's trying to say, hey, you need to call you about a house, and we want to sell you this house. You're like, I'm not really interested right now. And then you get 2 other realtors call you within the week on the same house.
Right.
What's your immediate reaction? Right. Wow. There must be something wrong with that house. So that happens in the market. We try to tell hiring managers, if they're getting 3 different recruiters with 3 different stories calling you about this job, they're like, wow, something's wrong with that company or that job if they're that desperate. Right. So it can backfire. Yeah.
Yeah. No, great point. Here's a good one: is how would you recommend I get in the recruiting business?
Oh, it's a good question. Yeah,
it's a good question, because a lot of people think about it that are in industry. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that what I would encourage you to do, we're affiliated with a group called Sanford Rose Associates, an affiliation with about 140 different firms across the world that are in different niches. And there's some on our website, but even more on their website of what is the world of recruiting like? What does it do? So if you love working with people, if you love engaging in conversation, if you love a certain industry, it can be, to me, it's the most challenging job in sales I've ever had, but it's absolutely the most rewarding. And when you get to represent great companies out in the market, it's like Santa Claus 300 days a year. I mean, it really is. And I think it's so rewarding to see people make, in your business right now too, Jim, take that next step in their career, and the feedback that you get, it's just, there's nothing like it. So back to what about recruiting? I would say, check out some of these videos of what it takes to be a recruiter. right? Because you've got to love people, you got to believe in people, you've got to be process oriented, you've got to be disciplined, you got to be self-motivated. But if you don't really like interacting with people, there are things you can do in recruiting, like research and some stuff like that. But I think I would just check out some of those videos either on our website or Sanford Rose, and that'll give you a good feel of it. And then if after that you say, boy, that's my cup of tea, I really want to do that, then I would say, great, reach out, let me know. And whether it's our firm or one of the other 140 firms that have a different specialty in some other area, I could probably refer you.
Yeah. No, that's great. What's the difference between a executive recruiter and a headhunter?
Terminology. I guess that's really the semantic, but I think when I think of headhunter, I think of transactional, and it reminds me of the phone calls I used to get and say, this person really doesn't care about me. They don't know anything about me. They got my name from somebody else because I happen to live in Denver, and they said I was a great salesperson.
Right.
That's all they know. And they don't really, they're like, here's what I got, here's the title of the job, here's what it pays, are you interested?
Yeah.
Well, that's abrupt, right? I mean, this is a career change and a life change, and you want me in 30 seconds to tell you, yeah, I'm ready?
Yeah.
Forget about it, right? So that's a headhunter, right?
Yeah.
An executive recruiter is much more, again, taking the time to build a relationship, because if you don't seek first to understand what that candidate wants, then how can you possibly make a match?
Yeah.
So that's what executive recruiters, in my view, how they differentiate from a headhunter.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And Bob, I think what you just said too is that building of relationship and really understanding your people, understanding the company you're representing is all different as well. And this headhunter thing, really came from that reputation as people, in recruiting businesses, used car salesmen years ago, right? They just call until somebody said yes, right? And they're just hunting heads, and there's still a lot of recruiters who do that, and they think that it's a numbers game, and that's all it is. And there's those kind of recruiters, and then there's recruiters who really, the great ones are all about relationships and really understand you because they care about, well, they know that this, like you just said, it's a career change. This is going to impact your livelihood. It's going to impact your family. It's a big deal, right? And you take it very serious. And I think that's the real difference when you look at good executive search firms and others, or headhunters, or things like that. So, yeah.
And Jim, I would just say that there is one positive thing that I do when someone says headhunter that you could say, thank you, I take that as a compliment, is that if you know in an industry the specifics, like you used to know about diagnostics, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, you need someone who can go to multiple departments. You need someone who knows capital equipment sales. You need someone who can manage a territory. All those things that you knew inherently because you knew the industry,
right? You
knew how to get to the right people. That aspect of headhunting is a positive because of what you know. And I think that can be a very time-saving and positive thing.
Yeah. Good question. We got time for two other things here. And one is, first of all, somebody asked about, about taking a look at resume and all this. So I would say remember I mentioned Lisa Carmen before. Okay. Lisa, I'm going to just say this. So if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but Lisa will be happy to look at your resume for no charge and give you her advice and all that stuff. And I think that'd be well worth it because that's her area of expertise. And so if you go to z1careerzone.com, just look up our partnerships, you'll find Lisa Carmen in there. And, info at Z1 Career Zone, just send me an email. I'll connect you with Lisa. You could also send it to Bob. Bob could give you his short take on it. But remember, Bob's in recruiting, right? Now he sees a lot of resumes. He'd give you some tips, but Bob's not the resume expert, so to speak. So, but either way, you could do that. So hopefully that helps answer that. It looks like it did. And I'm going to do one more question here, Bob. And this is a question that I think a lot of people think about. It's like, okay, how do you respond to the interviewer that you're early in the process? They're saying like, okay, what's your compensation requirements? What, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, you're not even to the point of talking about money, right? How do you professionally handle that without putting yourself perhaps at a disadvantage saying something, right? or it's like, well, we can't afford you, you're done, right? Before anything even happens. How's the best way for people to be able to do that?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really great question. And we try to talk to all our candidates about that before they go into battle, as I say in the interviews. And actually, the laws have changed now so that legally, in many places, they can't ask by law. Some still do, but they're not allowed to ask. And you find people sort of almost trying to trap people at a certain comp because they know that the candidates try to put their best foot forward, so they don't want to ask for too much early in the process.
I know.
But at the same time, so what I suggest to people is to say, hey, I'm looking for opportunities in this field that range from X to Y, and give a pretty broad range, right? That way you're not knocked out, but don't cut yourself short either, right? And just say, look, this is one of the 4 key attributes or the 4 P's that I'm looking at in my consideration. So compensation is important, but there are 3 other P's that are equally important. And so, and that way you've given them a range, you've responded to the question. Yeah. Unlikely they'll come back with anything else because you've answered it quickly and professionally.
Yeah, no. And Bob, I think you summed it up really, really well by saying, hey, and it's even more, even with that 1 P of package, say, you know what, there's a lot that goes into compensation. So to just give you a salary range is just one piece of that, and and talking about the other P's that are very important as well. And because you want to get to the point where they want you, right, and you want them. Okay, now let's start having those discussions and all that. And again, that's where Bob can certainly help you out with that as well. So I'm going to do this one last question because I think it's another good one. It says, as recruiters, what's your perspective on how the pandemic has affected the placement process? What job searching advice do you offer candidates today that is different from what you offered, a year and a half, 2 years ago?
Great question. I think that when March and April of last year happened, there was a certain freeze in the market where people weren't sure if the sky was falling or what was coming next or what to expect. And so a lot of processes stopped. But pretty quickly, people realized, especially for, at least in the diagnostics world, where people needed, couldn't get enough tests to test for COVID, the diagnostic supplies were exhausted. So I think that people realized that the interview process had to be modified and do less in person. And so what we really quickly did is we moved toward coaching people in Zoom and frankly screening our candidates instead of purely phone, doing Zoom. And you would warn them that, hey, by the way, your camera is looking up your nose and you probably need to clear that out before you're, so just little things that you wouldn't think normally in the interview because they're doing face-to-face. The other thing that I found is that an HR manager said to us, well, you guys know, they said, we expect more attrition. And I said, really? Your company's doing great. She goes, yeah, but it's so easy to interview now because it's all done on the web and through Zoom that you don't have to travel. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to put a suit on other than from the waist up, right, for an interview. So I hadn't thought about it. But so I think that what we're seeing is much more virtual hiring, much more virtual on-ramping with companies. And so they've had to adapt to that. I think the other thing is people are saying, wow, maybe people can work remote because we're all on Zoom anyway. So there's a lot more flexibility. And of course, that has ramifications for compensation. Do you pay the person in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the same as San Francisco? They're doing the same job.
Right. Interesting.
So it's interesting. And some of the big companies have said, hey, we're going to have a flat pay grade, no matter where you live, you decide.
Right, because it's remote.
Yeah. But I think at least for the recruiting, you do need to make sure that you are able to come across professionally with those kind of sessions with people.
Yeah, no, that's a great response. And first of all, Bob, we're any other questions? We'll get back to you guys. I did want to say Lisa left her cell phone on here. It's 303-947-6242. Again, it's 303-947-6242. If you got any questions on resumes, you're going to see in our follow-up, Bob's contact information, his website and all that stuff. So you'll see that. And this recording will be on our website here within 48 hours. So Bob, it's been a pleasure. This is awesome. This is awesome. And I've been looking forward to this one for months. And now I know why again, right? So anyway, I know we just got several more questions that just came in. So we'll get back to you on those. And so last, to just wrap this thing up here, I'm going to share my screen once more and go to my next slide here. Whoops, we did the question. So yeah, Bob, of course, I want to thank you again. Great stuff, man. Great information. Thank you for everybody who was on here again this month. I really appreciate it. And hopefully you got a lot out of this session. I'm sure you did. Next up is Michael McCubbin. And this dude, I'll tell you, he is one young go-getter. I met Michael probably about 10 years ago, and he's vice president right now with IMA Financial Group. He's been there for 10 years. Prior to that, he was in corporate sales for the Denver Broncos, and went to 3 different colleges during his undergraduate time, from Colorado State to Oregon State to University of Washington. Couldn't figure it out, apparently, right? But I'll tell you what, I have, and Bob knows this, I am so big on relationships and networking and the power of that. And when I met this young guy 10 years ago, I said, this guy's got it figured out. And now 10 years later, what he's been able to do, probably the best, clearly one of the top network people that I've ever met. And he does it in a way that is so beneficial to those in his network, right? And of course, those things go both ways. So he's going to be sharing tips and tools that you can incorporate immediately to, if you haven't even started a network that you know of, there'll be information there. If you've got a pretty good one and want to build it further, take that next step and level, you'll do it. It'll be entertaining. It'll be engaging for sure. So we're looking forward to having Michael on our next session, and just looking at his smile makes me crack up. So anyway, Bob, thank you again. And everybody, you have a great day, rest of the day out there, great rest of the week, and God bless you all. And we'll see you next month. Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
All right. Yep. See you all. Bye-bye.